Hey, Roto Grinders, what is going on? Welcome to the DFS Throwdown. I am joined by a couple of the best debaters on Roto Grinders in fantasy sports. I'm Eric Crane, of course, and I am joined, first of all, Dan Bach. Dan, what's going on, man?
Not much. It's great to be back. We kind of had a little bit of a hiatus from the Throwdown, but, I feel like I'm ready to go and take on Mr. Siege here on a little DFS debate.
That's a good time. And, of course, also joining us, this Siege, Mr. CJ Kaltenbach. What's going on, buddy?
Not much, man. It's been a good week. A good NFL week. It feels good to finally get back to the Throwdown. I need to step up my game. I had a few rough weeks there right before this hiatus. So hopefully the offseason got to adjust my game plan, and we'll go see if it works better this time.
I mean, I've been doing the Throwdown with you guys. I think you actually stepped it up your last few times. Are you saying you have a bigger, a higher gear?
I got another gear, and we're definitely gonna see if we can get there today.
Oh, I like it. So, anyways, guys, we have got 6 topics we're going to discuss. Also, if we have time at the end and you guys want to throw some topics in the chat, we will we'll try and bring them up. First of all, let's go ahead and jump to our first topic. NFL Week 1. We've got 4 weeks in the books. Obviously, a lot has happened in NFL, from injuries to surprise teams, surprise good teams, bad teams. We got 4 weeks of data, though. So, CJ, what are your biggest takeaways moving forward for DFS and NFL?
That recency bias is maybe the strongest it's ever been, just because of the amount of information that's out there. I think Roto Grinders and other sites that are coming up are doing a great job providing this information out there. But recency bias affects everyone. And I think we saw with Julio Jones this past week how far the recency bias has gone. Second highest total of the week, and he was still in the single digits. I think as we see this progress throughout the rest of the season, we need to realize that recency bias maybe is stronger than we thought. And it's a consistent thing we can take advantage of here moving forward this season.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good point, CJ. I'm actually kind of curious to see where it falls with Odell Beckham this week, who has just been a total disaster kind of to this point of the year, but gets this matchup versus Green Bay that looks pretty favorable in my eyes. And I think this will be an interesting test, because that a lot of people might have been burned by not playing Julio last week, despite kind of the reasons that you pointed out of why it might have been a pretty good matchup to go with. But, I think some of the things that we've certainly noticed this year and trends that are starting to emerge is, Detroit, they cannot guard the tight end whatsoever. Like, it has just become week in, week out. Take your tight ends versus Detroit. Now, honestly, it's funny because, I believe that they can't guard the position, but I'm still not going to take Zach Ertz this week for the Eagles against Detroit. But that's certainly one trend that we've seen. Todd Gurley has been a guy that hasn't been able to get it going very much running the football. I think I'll have a hotter take on him a little bit later here in the show. And then clearly, like Ezekiel Elliott, you look at the way that this guy has improved every single week, and I swear he gets stronger as the game goes on, as the season has gone on. And, I think that they're going to really try and pound the rock with him a lot there in Dallas. And honestly, I don't know about Tony Romo's return, if that's what's going to happen here, because Dak Prescott's played pretty well. If they're having success, I don't necessarily think that they rush to get rid of Dak Prescott at quarterback.
Yeah, I think Dak's the guy. I think the Tony Romo era is over at this point. I think that he's done enough with that offense. Why would you change it up? You've gone on the road and beaten some decent teams. I don't see any sort of reason to change that up. You make a good point about Ezekiel Elliott. I'm actually really looking forward to his matchup this weekend against Cincinnati, a team that he should be able to do quite well against. But I'm curious to see how they handle the throwing aspect with Dak Prescott. Do they pack the box and make Dak beat him through the air? I'm really interested to see that game. I think it's one of the more important games of the week. You mentioned Odell Beckham Jr., and I think that's going to be a great option this week. I think he'll be higher than Julio Jones just because of the recency bias of the recency bias. But I definitely think we will get there in the future.
That's a little much, isn't it? Recency bias of the recency bias.
Okay, everyone this week, what's the conversation topic been all week? It's been Julio Jones and how he was low owned because of the recency bias. So that's a new bias that affects how we look at other situations like that.
I like the double recency bias.
I know. There's got to be a better way to phrase that.
There probably is. But this is live TV, so I didn't think of anything on the fly.
So you mentioned that you think the Tony Romo era in Dallas is over.
I think it is. Dak has done everything you could possibly ask him to do. He's limited mistakes. He's shown that he can go on the road and win when they're down double digits at a tough place to win in San Francisco. They were 7-1 last year at home, I believe, or 7-1 against the spread, something like that. They're a much better team at home, and he showed it with poise. And without his number one wide receiver, like, why wouldn't you stick with him at this point?
Dan, do you think the Tony Romo era in Dallas is over?
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, honestly, the guy's won 2 playoff games in 12 seasons or whatever it's been. It's not like this guy's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback that we're talking. This isn't, the Peyton Manning situation with Brock Osweiler last year, where Manning was arguably looked at as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Nobody is looking at Tony Romo in that light because he's not. He's not a Hall of Famer. I think I heard somebody call him that. I think it was CSU Ram earlier this year. That was a bonehead call by him. But no, he's always been overrated, and especially when it comes down to winning the big game, he hasn't done it. So as long as Dak Prescott is winning football games and playing well, I don't see a reason why they make the change at all. And if anything, it gives you an option if Dak gets hurt to fall back to somebody who they feel like they can trust. But I don't think you make that change if they have any sort of momentum at all. And one other thing that we got to talk about, too, in terms of NFL and what we've seen the first 4 weeks, Minnesota and Denver right now, I mean, I'm just not playing anybody against those guys. I think if you are playing guys, certainly in cash games, against those defenses, you are out of your freaking mind. They are so good right now, and it's not a hot take, but I think sometimes people might get cute. Even in tournaments, I'm just not really interested in going that path. Those teams are absolutely legit and one of the better defenses that we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely.
Throw this down as a QQ for chat because I want to respond, but we're out of time.
All right. We'll throw that down as a QQ. So chat, somebody put a response to that in the QQ so I can write it down. But we got to move on to our next topic. Let's talk about some regression and some positive regression. Dan, what players do you see having the most regression and positive regression coming up in the NFL?
Yeah, I think actually a couple of guys brought up in the last segment. I think you're going to see Beckham Jr. have some positive regression. I think you're going to see Todd Gurley have it as well. Gurley, if you look at his matchups so far this season, they have been absolutely dreadful, to use Siege's word. And he actually gets a nice break here for the next 2-3 weeks, where going against defenses that aren't nearly as stout against the run. And I think he's going to take advantage of that because he still is their best player. He actually made some really nice plays in the pass game last game as well. And I think they realize they got to get the ball in his hands. And, he still is getting a lot of carries. I just think it's bad matchups here in the early going. And it's funny because the middle of the season isn't so bad, but the last 3 weeks of the season, again, he runs into a lot of these same teams again. So, if you're playing the season-long variety of fantasy sports, you might want to trade them so you don't have to use them in, week 15, 16, 17. But I actually think you're going to see a big improvement in him here very soon. And same with Odell Beckham. I mean, he's got 0 touchdowns through 4 games. That's not going to keep up. They need to get him involved because he's an absolute head case if he's not scoring touchdowns and being a centerpiece of that offense. I think they know that, and I expect them to really try and force him the ball more than they have in the past. And, yes, they've got more mouths to feed with Sterling Shepard and Victor Cruz coming back, but that should also take maybe some of the coverage away, you would think, of double teams on Odell Beckham. So I think it's just a matter of time before he gets going, breaks out as a big one. I mean, he is a great player. We saw A.J. Green do it. We saw Julio Jones do it. I think it's a matter of time for Odell Beckham to have that big one.
Yeah, I thought I was in the middle of a Senate filibuster there. All jokes aside, I think Odell Beckham is absolutely one of those positive regression candidates that we've talked about. I think the Detroit passing game, week 1, everybody was super high on it. Marvin Jones has been great, and the rest of the passing game has been not as good. But they've played 2 of their 3 outdoor games these last 2 weeks. They got 1 outdoor game left the entire season. And, yes, I know it's October 5th. They have 1 outdoor game the rest of the season, home or road. So you're going to see Matt Stafford and this offense start to take off indoors. That's kind of where the offense was designed for. So I think you're going to see some positive regression from guys like Golden Tate, Eric Ebron. Marvin Jones, I think, will take it to another level. Even Theo Riddick or Zach Zenner this week. I think the Detroit offense has got some positive regression coming. In terms of some negative regression, I think the Panthers defense, the first 3 weeks, they faced 3 of the worst passing attacks in the league: Denver, San Francisco, and Minnesota. And we saw what a competent passing attack can do against them. I think this week, a lot of people are expecting the Panthers defense to revert back to form. I think Mike Evans is in a great spot. And I think you're going to see the Panthers secondary kind of get exposed here. They still don't have a pass rush. And when you start 2 rookies in the secondary, they're eventually going to figure out how to exploit you. I think we kind of saw the blueprint, and other teams are going to start to follow suit.
Yeah, I want to throw one guy in there too. I think is going to slow down just a little bit, and I think that's Terrell Pryor. I know CJ's a big fan of his. I just think that teams are going to scheme to take him out and say, hey, we're going to let Cody Kessler or Isaiah Crowell beat us. And you kind of saw it a little bit last week. Josh Norman covering him all across the field, shadowing him. And he didn't really have a good game. He scored that touchdown, which obviously paid him off over there on DraftKings. But if he doesn't get that touchdown, not a great day for him. And I think you're going to see opponents basically say, okay, if we slow down Terrell Pryor, what are they going to beat us with? And they're going to say to themselves, they're not going to beat us. So I expect him to kind of take a step back here after some teams maybe start figuring out what the Browns are trying to do with him.
Yeah, I think this week against the Patriots is kind of an interesting dynamic spot, but I also think you're going to see him get more quarterback, more running back snaps than we saw against the Redskins. I think they tried to go traditional last week, and we kind of saw the results of that. So I agree that he probably won't do as much as a wide receiver moving forward, but I think his role at quarterback and running back might evolve a little bit, especially in that red zone, and steal a touchdown or two. So I'm still pretty high on the guy. I think that's certainly a realistic point of view. Another thing that I really think that people need to consider here as we move forward is what's the deal with Carson Wentz? Like, where are we really at, right? Because we saw how good the Steelers are, and I think we've now all kind of like, oh, the Eagles' defense is for real. But every team just puts up a dud or two. And if you kind of just evaluate that Steelers loss as a dud, they still haven't faced any good teams yet. They go on the road to Detroit, which isn't all that good of a defense here, and they've got a good offense. Like, let's see what they can do here on the road in Detroit. I think Detroit's offense is in a good spot.
It's going to be real interesting to see what Philly does and Carson Wentz does moving forward. All right, next question. We've had some changes this year in DFS and how the sites score some stuff, the players that are available. Dan, what do you like and what don't you like that the DFS sites have done this differently this year with football?
Let's start with I'll start with DraftKings. And one thing I like, and I've talked about it a lot, is I really, really, really like their King of the Beach Q format that they decided to roll out with small buy-in entry points. I haven't seen one above $20, and every single tournament is 5 entry max. And it really evens the playing field. And yes, if you win, you don't necessarily queue to the live final, but you queue to 150 or 180 man field where the top 50 make it. That's a very reasonable expectation. And at worst case, you're getting, I think, $1,500 just for getting to that next level. So I love the fact that they added a queue with kind of a limited entry to it. And honestly, and CJ, you commented as well, that you find yourself playing slates you'd never play simply because you want to try and get to Atlantis and take part in this queue that's really set up incredibly fair. So hats off to him there. Biggest disappointment, though, back on DraftKings, though, has been some of the salary, and especially this past season or this past week. The salary setup was a joke over there. They completely ignored a number of players, and it stood out, and it made cash games, in my eyes, close to unplayable because we had so much lineup overlap. And I understand that's going to happen. But, to me, it's very simple for these guys to kind of look at that player pool and be like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have Carlos Hyde at $4,200 or Jordan Howard. Maybe we should pump him up a little bit considering he's going to be the starter and Langford got hurt. And when they ignore those factors, it just drives everybody to the same people in cash games, and I hate it.
So what you're saying is my best cash week of the year was a total fluke.
That's what I'm saying. Absolutely. Even the Siege could get cash games right. It was so obvious. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a fair point. It wasn't like everybody actually played those guys, but certainly I think there was a pretty standard lineup construction that you pretty much had to go to. And it was like a 2v2 or a 3v3, but it never works out that way. So, I mean, those weeks are kind of nice from a cash newbie perspective who's not good at it. Like, oh, hey, this is really simple. It's like plugging in 1 + 1, you get 2. Like, I can enjoy this. But I'm with you. I think the pricing was way too soft last week. It was tough in tournaments, even guys like Melvin Gordon. It took every bit of willpower to talk myself into a fade just because he was too underpriced. Like, he should have been 1,000 more, and the fade should have been something I was ready to do on Wednesday. And there's a lot of pricing like that too. Like, just guys like
another one.
Will Fuller is still way too underpriced for a guy getting 10 targets. And why, when I said that you said fade Minnesota entirely, I told Eric to write it down, because I think Will Fuller still at 5,800 is criminally underpriced for the amount of targets and usage he's getting in that offense. So I still think there's some soft spots, but the cap is way better this week. Things that I like, the King of the Beach, we talked about it. Home run, like they started with that baseball thing, and you could clearly see that was a test run for this, and they crushed it. There's no other way to put it. They've absolutely crushed it. Everything, it's always selling out. There's never overlay. Just hats off. They nailed it.
And you don't have to pay $1 million out the first place to get people excited to play. That's kind of what I've learned on this too. I mean, it's nice to have the big one, but it's also nice to have that smaller one that they make very, very, limited in multi-entry.
Yeah, and any sort of bankroll can get you there.
Yep.
My mom got there for $1. $1.
Yeah, I've got to bring that up, because this is one of the cooler things I can remember happening since I've been working in DFS. Your mom won a total of 3 seats last week, right?
Yeah, 3.
I mean, 1 to the New York Live final and 2 to the King of the Beach, right?
Yeah, and she spent exactly a combined $2 on those King of the Beach. She shipped both $1 queues.
That's amazing.
Congrats.
If she can queue on her bankroll, anybody can.
Are you saying that even Britt Devine could win a qualifier?
Impossible.
I mean, he has the bankroll for it. I don't know if he has the as I am to cash, Britt is the tournaments. Can I say that? Is that appropriate?
I like that.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. Dan, are you going to be firing just these King of the Beach queues just over and over? I know you won one last week, by the way. Congrats.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a reason not to when you consider, like, you still got to get into the next – you got to finish top 50. So you want to get as many bullets as you can get into that live final. I'm sure the limit's like 5 or something.
I think it's 5, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to get that many. But if I could get an extra team or 2 – it just gives you more options, and especially in that format of tournament, you just want to diversify what you got so you can at least earn the trip. Because honestly, for me, like, a lot of times the trip doesn't matter, but like,
yeah, they see experience, right?
Excited, and I'm going to bring the kids to this one. I've gone to this in the past, and it is just a great place to bring your family. And
it'll definitely be fun. It's definitely going to be fun. All right, we got to go from talking to something fun to something not so fun. Controversy in the Millionaire Maker. We had a small controversy due after Papa Gates, who is Chipotle Addict's brother. He won the Millionaire Maker 2 weeks ago. There's been a lot of talk in the forums. There's been a lot of back and forth between some forum members that has gotten so deep that I have trouble keeping up. CJ, where do you stand on this whole thing?
So here's the deal. Let's start with what the sites have already done, right? If you live in the same house, the max number of entries you can do is by house. So let's start there for the final. I know it's true for the finals. So that's a step in the right direction. Here's the thing, and the point where I get lost. If they are sharing money behind the scenes, it's going to be tough to ever find out. Realistically, they're brothers, and they could do it easily without anyone really ever knowing. But that being said, if they really entered 2 different projection systems into Fantasy Cruncher, at this point, I kind of just throw up my hands and just say, if it wasn't the same model where one guy took lamps 100 through 150 and 151 through 300, I don't know what we can do about it. Is it slimy and probably deceiving the rules? Yeah, but if they're not using the same projection system, I just don't know where we can draw a line, because this is in the law, we kind of view that bad facts make bad case law. This feels like a really bad facts pattern, and I don't want it to start creating rules based off of this scenario, because that's just going to lead to a lot of other bad things in the future that we weren't intending to do.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me in the Millionaire Maker in particular was I didn't see the synergy between the lineups that they put in together that would have made you think that they collaborated on it. And that's the whole point is, wanting to avoid collaboration to exceed entry limits. And if you looked at the lineups, I saw the percentage owned for both teams or both guys, both brothers. And I didn't see the synergy. I didn't see them playing off each other whatsoever. And that's why I'm kind of looking at this and agree with you, CJ. Like, there's just definitely like not enough evidence to kind of to prove that it happened. And outside of sharing money, which we've talked about in the past regarding these guidelines, good luck finding that out. Good luck proving that somebody is sharing money with somebody else. And for me, the evidence alone in terms of looking at the lineups for this particular tournament, I don't see it. And it's clear. I mean, these guys have been really good players for a long time. And I do understand the frustration and the people who say, well, they are using the same cash lineups. Doesn't that automatically mean that they work together in tournaments? And I think the answer to that is probably no, it doesn't. I think it definitely works together in cash. They probably use the same projection model for cash. But the way that you win tournaments, I don't really necessarily believe I've seen enough evidence to think they work together in this one instance. I'll be curious to see what DraftKings, I mean, clearly these guys are back playing, so they've kind of, it appears to exonerated them of any wrongdoing. But it almost comes to the point where you wonder at what point in time, it might be hard to do now because if they ask them to do it, it might imply guilt. But ask these two guys, hey, why don't you just play under one account? Just do it like Ray of Hope or some of these other guys have done. I don't know if that's the final answer. That was probably what they should have done long before. But yeah, it's kind of where I stand on it. I mean, I just don't think in this particular case the evidence is there.
I think it's just tough, right? Because it's like,
tough. Yeah, very tough.
Like, I guess I have a brother, so like I know, like,
you got a mom who plays, CJ. Yeah, you're next up.
Oh no, here
you are next up, boys and girls.
Here comes the thread. The CJ and CJ's mom are collaborating.
Deadspin is going to do an article on CJ here very, very soon. I have a hunch.
I hope so. That'd be hilarious because I didn't even enter like the cue that she won from New York. I wasn't even in the field, which is great. I guess it's just a situation like, I mean, I guess that's a fair point. I could use her as a comparison. Like, I know she watches the Grinders live shows and obviously respects my opinion, I would hope, as her son. But certainly, like, she does her own research.
Even if she asks you, though, like, I'm sure she might have asked, what do you think of this guy this week? Or what do you think of this team I built? Like, has she ever put forth a team to you and said, what do you think of this?
Yeah, but of course.
Okay, but is that conspiring?
No, of course not, right? No, exactly. And I think that's not the spirit. Like, I think it's like, a number of people are like, it's so cool your mom plays. Like, that's what we want to be doing in this industry. It's not something we should. So, like, just because it's a brother instead of like a mother-son relationship, why are we treating this so much differently?
The difference is, and this is the big thing, is they're not just brothers playing. They're like two brothers who play at about the highest level you can of DFS. That's the problem. That's why everybody is got a problem with it. Not because they're brothers. It's just because they're both really, really good at it. And naturally people are thinking they're working to conspire since they're both good at it. Which,
and I guess that's my point. Like, I don't think it should be treated any differently just because they're really good and they're talented.
Yeah, I was going to say, if these guys weren't winning all the money, nobody would be caring. But they are, so it's an issue. I really hope this doesn't go farther or something gets settled because I think this has the potential to really blow up in a negative way. All right, Dan, we're going to talk about a proposal you made on your podcast this week. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Go ahead and explain to the viewers, to CJ, your theory, and let's talk about the merits of it.
Yeah, I talked about this a couple days ago about maybe sites deciding to restructure the way that they do three-mans or at least build a complementary system to the way they do three-mans because I can't speak for you guys, but whenever I try to play them, it's the same guys in all the three-mans, and it's frustrating. Like, I don't want to play the same people all the time in them. So my idea was to basically set up a pool of players, and you'd have to have it in multiples of 3. And, you could do 33, 333, whatever. And then as soon as it fills, basically everybody who is entered, and it's going to be single entry, gets randomly matched into three-man games. So therefore, every time you enter one of these pools, you're going to be facing off likely against different competition. I suppose there's a possibility it could be randomly matched to the same person in multiples, but that would be pretty hard if you're talking about 300 plus people. So I think it's a great way to ensure that you get opponent diversity, which I think everybody wants, especially in 3-man games, and there's none of it at this point in time. And on top of that, I think it solves the problem of people, squatting games and then dropping out of games when they don't like their opponents. I mean, getting back to the last two guys, there's some talk that that's happened on the high stakes levels. And this would be a good way to avoid that and saying, hey, you enter this once we match you up, there's no canceling your entry. Like, you're in. And I think it kind of solves two really big problems, and I think would really make 3-man games much more compelling. And I'd be entering these kind of pools all the time just because I know I'm going to get opponent diversity. I don't mind playing good players. I just don't want to play the same good player all the time.
So my role in this is to argue with you and try to pretend you're wrong. But you're not wrong here. So I think you're spot on. I think I can't even think of a scenario in which this is going to go poorly. Like, you could just do all sorts of different sizing, as the day went on, and I'm sure those guys would definitely play as the max they could play in the pools, but at least then you're still going to get a ton of roster diversity out of it.
I think this is a great idea. Yeah, and I don't think it's something that could replace 3-man games off the bat, because I think there's a learning curve. A lot of people would be like, what the heck is this? This is odd. But down the road, potentially it could. I think people would realize the merits of it and how it makes it a better game for everybody. And I mean, I guess we could segue into this. I don't, and I'm not a proponent of randomizing head-to-head games. I still think that there's a lot to be said in terms of daily fantasy being a skill game and game selection that goes with that. But I think that this is kind of, a nice complement to be able to still have head-to-head games, but open up the 3-mans way better than we have right now. And see if anybody listens. What are the chances that we get something like this in the next 6 months? See how much power I have here.
0.
All right. Why would give me a break? I thought I got a little bit more.
Okay, time out. You have to remember. It's the FanDuel development team we're talking about here.
DraftKings could do it too.
All right. Well, FanDuel, the chances of 0. It will take them 3 years to get the CSVs working. You're not going to get this innovation. All right. I'll give you a better chance than that on DraftKings. Probably 10 to 15%.
Yeah, I'll take it.
What would be the downside for the sites, CJ?
There isn't any, but that doesn't there's no good reason not for it to happen, Eric. But that hasn't stopped the sites before from not implementing things.
Yeah, what's the downside of snake drafts? What's the downside of pick'em games? There's no downside, but yet nobody has done it. I mean, I think expecting it to overtake 3-mans for good, there's downside to it, because I think the liquidity in terms of the people who would the number of total games they have would go down. But I'm not telling them to abandon their current system. I'm just saying, hey, slowly but surely ramp something new up that's better for everybody.
I think everybody would enjoy. Poker did this. They introduced what was known as Zoom poker, where you would sit down, you'd get assigned at a random table against 9 random guys. They had a little quick fold button. You'd click the quick fold button, boom, you'd move to a new table, and they had about anywhere from 200 to 1,500 people at every stake doing this, and it was really popular. It was really a great thing. I don't see a downside here, and I don't see why the sites wouldn't do it. CJ, how much action would you put in on those 3-mans if they had this format?
So you're asking me how much action I would play in.
How about more? How much more action? I don't know if you play 3-mans, do you?
It's a cash game variant. So I play for football, I would probably play it, but that's really about it.
All right.
I would probably play at least 5x more 3-mans, maybe even higher than that, because I do like the 3-mans. I think it's nice to kind of have something that's pseudo cash game that pays you 2.5x what you normally get. So I would definitely be giving them way more looks.
Yep. I'll be interested. Come on, give us a test run. Come on, FanDuel, DraftKings, somebody out there, give us a test run. We will prove that there is a market for this. All right, we're going to jump into a little basketball talk. And CJ, I know you love your random basketball games. We saw how excited you got for Olympics. You were pumped. You're putting out articles. No, the 8th man for the China national team is great. Stuff like that, just completely bizarre. Anyways, CJ, give us some tips for what people need to know to win in preseason NBA.
So the minutes are going to be pretty much evenly distributed unless you're on a Jason Kidd team and you're going to give MCW 30-something minutes in a preseason game. For reasons that I still don't understand, and I still have yet to find a understandable, comprehensible reason. He should be right there with Buck Showalter. So the minutes are going to be equal. What you really have to be focusing on is the usage rates when they're on the court. You got to be targeting guys that are going to get the ball in their hands. So your superstars like your Damian Lillards, your Anthony Davises, your Kevin Durant's, you want those type of guys because when they're on the floor, they're still going to have high usage rates. And then you got to mix and match with backups that are going to be like on the second unit in charge, like Buddy Hield for the Pelicans is a great example. He runs that second unit. Patrick McCaw of Golden State didn't have a great game, but he runs that second unit. Like those are the type of guys. So for me, it's all about usages that because the minutes are going to pretty much wash out. I mean, you do have to see who's going to play 23 versus 18, but the biggest part is the usage rates and focusing on which guys are going to have the high usage rates.
Yeah, and I would add to that, be conservative on your bankroll and playing it because it is a bit more unpredictable than the NBA. I mean, than the regular season. I mean, NBA regular season is, I would say, the easiest, but it's one of the easiest to project what people are going to do day to day. There's way less variance than you get in any other sport, I would say. Same doesn't really apply to preseason. I mean, you definitely run into situations where guys either get in foul trouble, they're getting blown out, they just don't feel good. Like there's no reason for them to play in preseason games. So there's a chance that they just won't care. They just won't play. And so, don't overly invest too much of your bankroll into it. With that said, though, there's definitely a skill to it, and there's an edge to be had for those who do the research and read the columns and watch CJ on Hangouts. And there's definitely money to be made in it. But be smart. Like don't be playing like 3x what you do on a NFL Sunday on preseason hoops. Like that's not smart.
Yeah, I find it interesting because we end up playing these guys that we normally wouldn't play. CJ, go and touch on real quick, because a lot of people in NBA, they don't like to leave salary on the table. How important is it in preseason NBA to leave some salary on the table?
I don't think you have to. You can if you want. Like, if you can build a lineup with stars that are going to play the first half that you think have high enough usage rates, you can do that. I've been leaving a ton of money on the table for guys because I wanted to play guys like Kelly Oubre, who I thought was going to be one of the best small forwards on the board, and he only got beat by Paul George, I think, on the slate. So there's certainly situations where I'm going to do that to attack usage guys, but it doesn't mean you have to by any means. I think there's a lot of different ways to approach preseason, which is why I think it's kind of an interesting game, because the sites have kind of priced down the stars to the point where it makes it a little interesting.
And hats off to FanDuel DraftKings for offering it. Like, they haven't done this in the past. It was always like Random Draft Day was like the only site that had preseason NBA. And I don't even think they salaried the player pool. I think everybody had the same one, kind of like preseason football on DraftKings. But there's clearly demand for it. I think I saw FanDuel get to like their slam number 6 or something a couple of nights ago. And I think DFS Hoops has the potential to be to drive. I'm not going to say as much revenue as NFL because that's crazy. But over the course of a season, I think there's a chance when you look at the length of it, the number of days they have to play, it could probably it potentially could get to like maybe 70% of NFL. And I think if you told people that a couple of years ago, they'd say you're full of it. But I just see NBA growing and growing and growing, and it's exciting. It's great.
DraftKings has a $50K $3 today on a 3-game slate.
On a 3-game slate.
That fills. I mean,
keep filling. They fill all the time. We saw that with the Olympics. The Olympic ones were filling too. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Olympics. Oh man, don't get me excited, Eric. Like, what do we got? Like another 30-something months 39 more months to go until I get it back. A little more than that, like 42. I'm ready for it already. They can bring that back.
Let's just hope that they don't run another $1 million golf tournament next year or 3 years from now.
Yeah, all right. So it wasn't a million. It was $1 million tournament.
And lose their ass because the Siege goaded them into it.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, it was you.
No, we're going to give you credit, man. You get the credit where you deserve it, and you deserve it here. It's great. I love seeing the Olympics. I love how excited people get for these early season, preseasons, slates, because They haven't had a taste in basketball in a while. If you gave junior high hoops like DFS, people would jump on it. It's really unbelievable. All right, guys, if you've got any QQs that you want these two to debate, we still got some time on our hands, and we would love to get them in. Go ahead and throw them up in the chat. But we've got a few right here that we're going to go ahead and discuss. CJ, this one's for you. NHL scoring. We know FanDuel's changed it up a little bit this year.
Don't get me started.
Oh, we're going to get you started because we still have 20 minutes, and we need somebody to get started. So go ahead and talk to us about what FanDuel has done to NHL this year. Oh, no. Oh, you look like you're about to erupt.
They killed their product.
Oh, no. That's not good.
They pretty much just copied DraftKings for no good reason. They added the absolute worst stat they could have added in block shots. Like, all they had to do was get rid of penalty minutes, and it was fine. And they just decided to completely blow up the product for no good reason. They just jacked up the scoring 4 times. And it's honestly almost, I mean, it's playable, but it's no different than DraftKings. Like, every other site in every different sport, like, the scoring systems are different. Why did they have to decide to just copy it for hockey? Like, all you had to do was just keep plus minus and get rid of penalty minutes, and you were fine. Cut plus minus in half if you want. That's fine. But, like, now you've just made it the same as DraftKings, and it's kind of like, where's the fun in that?
I think, CJ, I don't play hockey, so I'm not one to talk about what's the right stats or whatnot. But the point that he made about, making it identical to your largest competitor is an absolutely valid criticism, because that's one of the things that I think is great about the sites. Like, as much as I, give Draft or FanDuel, for having a kicker, at least it does differentiate them from DraftKings, and I think that's really important. It's why, I don't want to see FanDuel suddenly have late swap, because I like having differences between the sites. And if the changes they made basically put them in line with DraftKings, I don't know. I don't think that's probably the route I would have gone. I guess I've heard good things about them getting rid of left wing and right wing and just making wings in general. Do you agree?
Yeah, because
you couldn't.
They were too lazy at updating it. It wasn't because it was just they were so. The whole point of hockey is you stack lines, and they were just so bad at updating the lines. So it was just you could never stack lines, and that's what people were frustrated about. So I guess in terms of making it easier for them to run the product, congratulations. Fine, but it's not exactly something they should be congratulated for either.
All right, I got another question. Let's move on now. This is from Richie Rich. This is really interesting, and I've seen some talk on Twitter about this, so I want to hear what you guys have to say. Dan, what team are you looking for the most for NBA season from a DFS standpoint?
Oh, it's the Houston Rockets, baby. Are you kidding me? We got Mike D'Antoni and James Harden together. It's a match made in heaven. They're going to score 125 points a night. I absolutely cannot wait to stack Rockets and whoever the Rockets are playing pretty much every single night. D'Antoni is a fantasy gold mine, so no question the Rockets. But I'm not going to lie, I watched the Golden State Warriors last night. I'm not going to use them a lot for fantasy, but my God, are they going to just kill opponents? It's sick. It is absolutely sickening to have literally the 3 best shooters in the league on the same team. That doesn't happen. It does not supposed to happen that way, but that's exactly what they have. They might win, 80 games this year. This is a crazy number. They're awesome.
CJ?
Oh, man. The Rockets are going to be so good. You know how much I have this love for Ryan Anderson, and I was watching that game last night, and I just couldn't help but think, I'm going to roster that guy so much. He's just going to get to stand in the corner and get those wide open threes all season long. I actually was joking on Twitter, and I don't even know if it's so much of a joke anymore. Is Houston going to be the new Coors Field of NBA? Just because
the
defense.
I mean, I think maybe to a point, but NBA is a little bit different in terms of stacking up. I mean, yes, it can pay off for you, but especially the way the salary structure is usually good enough in the NBA where you kind of prevent certain things from taking place. If they're scoring a ton of points, their crappers are going to be priced up a little bit higher. So I think we're going to run into a little bit less of a problem than we have, say, in baseball. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the correlation isn't as strong with stacking as it is in baseball, but I think you could see similar thing to the Saints for football. I think you're going to see a similar situation just because of the pace. And it's going to be the road teams going in there. You're just going to find values and pace up games all year long. And I'm going to roster so much Ryan Anderson.
Well, one more thing that I'm really looking forward to is Russell Westbrook just averaging a triple-double throughout the season, putting together a top 5 all-time offensive season in the NBA. I think he's going to do it this year.
And they'll win like 40 games.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, who cares if they win or not?
I don't care who wins.
I just want to make it clear. Like, they have like the 5th highest win total prop in Vegas, which is just insane.
Well, if they get there, just give Westbrook the MVP.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. One of the reason that makes it insane with that win prop is with the amount of usage Russ Westbrook is going to get, which everybody knows is going to be massive. I mean, what if he misses a month? What if he misses 2 months? Can you imagine what's going to happen to that Oklahoma City win total if he's out for 2 months?
Oladipo every day for 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I actually think the under, if that's the 5th highest out there, I mean, the under is just you can't bet the over.
No, that's for sure. Definitely can't.
Absolutely can't bet the over. You either bet the under and fist pump about it, or you just fade the entire thing. It makes
or you just bet Westbrook to win the MVP, because I think if they go over, he'll probably win the MVP.
I like that. CJ, you brought up about the Warriors and how good they're going to be. From a DFS standpoint, I think you're going to be fading him for the most part. Can you explain your thought process there?
Yeah, so there's going to be a consistent fade just because they got 4 superstars. They're going to be priced up, and they're just not going to play any minutes. Like, they're going to be up by like 20, 25 midway through the 3rd quarter, or maybe like last night they'll be up 50 at the 8-minute mark. I don't know. And that was the Clippers. Like, that's not a bad team. They were up 50 at the 8-minute mark to go in the 3rd quarter. I mean, like, you could just see like and play like 22 minutes a game the entire season.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be way more focused on championship and less about breaking records like they were a year ago. And Kerr is going to be so much more conservative with minutes. I do think, though, he's also going to be more conservative when it comes to giving guys days off. He didn't really do that much at all last season. He has the ability to do that, and I think those are going to be the spots where you can really – when Curry takes a day off, Durant's going to have that many more looks at it, vice versa. So, and obviously injuries happen, and there's going to be times to play those guys, but I agree. When everybody's healthy, it's going to be tough to kind of have too much exposure to them.
Patrick McCaw day is going to be amazing.
Is he the Parrot? Is that his nickname? Can we call him that?
I don't know. That sounds like an awesome nickname, though. I'll gladly hop on board.
I'm happy with that. Yeah, the parrot, caw, like that.
I mean, parrots are parrots. I mean, the history of parrots as a nickname is pretty solid, so we can go with it.
Wait, hold on. What's the history of parrots as a nickname?
If you've never seen Edwin like this with the parrot and the blue
I have seen that, but I didn't.
Last night. Although, did you see the GIF? Did you see the GIF that somebody made of a parrot running around the base?
Yes.
Encarnacion on his arm? I thought that was pretty good.
That was great.
I want to talk about the Warriors one last time and bring this up. We saw last year they broke their wins record, didn't win the title. I mean, this is a team that if they wanted to, they could break the wins record. Dan, I don't think they particularly care about it, though. What do you think they're going to do this year?
Yeah, I don't think they care either. I mean, it always comes to a point where, like, imagine if they started like 40-0 or something this year, like some absolutely insane number that nobody would think is even possible. Then maybe they start thinking about it. But I think they made it very clear after losing the championship last year, which admittedly, a Draymond Green ejection, if that doesn't take place, they might win that series in 5 games, and the narrative's a little bit different. But they didn't. Cleveland won, and I think that Golden State, they're looking at things very differently this year than they are last year. So I just don't think it matters to them unless something crazy happens to start the year.
That Draymond suspension might have cost the Celtics Kevin Durant, so we're not talking about that.
Really? It's going to go back to the Celtics for you?
Always goes back to Boston.
Man, that Celtics team's going to be really good in the East. Like, it's got no chance against the Warriors, let's be clear. Like, it will be 4 and out and lose by 20 every time. But they got a real shot to fight with the Cavs in the East. They're really good.
Oh boy, here we go again. We are 2 months from CJ's All Boston All the Time show. All right, I want to talk about this upcoming playoff series in baseball. We got Toronto and Texas. Obviously, Toronto with the big home run last night by the Parrot to win the game for the Blue Jays. Do we see anybody just getting knocked out with Rougned Odor, Jose Bautista?
No, it's the playoffs. This is like, why? They're not going to be that stupid.
I want them to be that stupid. That sounds like fun to me.
I mean, it's only going to happen if there's somebody getting majorly shown up. Like, if you see Joey Bats, bat flip till, out of the stadium or into the stands or something like that, something totally showing up the other team, I wouldn't put it past something taking place. But I don't think it's going to be, unprompted people throwing at each other from the get-go. So we'll see how the emotions go in this game. I think it's pretty awesome that they're going against each other. But the real storyline is the Cubs. I mean, come on. Like, this is the year, right? This is finally the year Chicago gets it done. It has to be.
I mean, CJ, are the Cubs your favorite to win the World Series? Oh, no, never mind. I know this answer. Go ahead. CJ, who's your favorite team? Maybe Boston? That's going to win the World Series here.
Well, it's Boston. I mean, first of all, it's shocking. They have their pitching rotation, like, they figured it out in late September. Like, they were in a 4-way race in the AL East, and they pretty much just said, peace out, everybody. Swept Baltimore, swept New York. They crushed it. They won like 11 straight to win the division in prime time. The team finally figured it out. They look really good heading in the postseason. They get a Cleveland team without some of their best pitching. Looks like Trevor Bauer is pitching game 1 over Kluber for reasons I still don't understand. So that's a good advantage there for the Red Sox. I think this is a good spot for the Red Sox to win that series. And then Texas or Toronto, I think we can handle either team. And then it really just comes down to, are the Cubs a postseason team? Are they built for the postseason? Can these pitchers that can't hold on runners win these 2-1 type games? We saw them struggle against the Mets last year in these tight postseason games. Can they handle that in the postseason? I don't know the answer to that. I'm really interested to find out.
I think they can. I think this is the year. They got the manager in Madden, who's putting them down the right path. And I think I'll be stunned if they don't win the World Series this year. And I know they're the Cubs. I know they're the Cubs. I know that there's a history of them flaming in these sort of situations, but they're a very well-built baseball team from top to bottom. They have the best pitching. They've got very solid relief pitching. Like, I don't see any issues with them at all coming playoff time. And most of these guys are young enough not even to, worry about Bartman and jinxes and black cats and other stuff that's happened over the years with them. So, Chris Bryant's a stud. Rizzo's a stud. Addison Russell's morphed into a stud. I love this team from top to bottom. And the great thing about it is they did it without their outfielder too, who got hurt the first week. Everybody thought it was
Schwarber.
Schwarber. And everybody's like, oh no, it's the end. And they just kept going and, didn't hold them back one bit.
Yeah, instead Wilson Contreras came up and just started crushing. I mean, is nobody talking about the Dodgers right now? Like, why is that not happening? CJ, why are people just completely ignoring Los Angeles?
Because they should be ignored.
Kershaw's got to do something in the playoffs. He hasn't done
like their pitch. Let's see their pitching. Like, their pitching just got completely annihilated that last weekend of the season against the Giants. Like, they did not look good.
I have my own theory there. I think they punted it because they didn't want to face St. Louis in the playoffs.
Okay, and I'm the homer now. Got it.
Hey, we've seen what the Cardinals have done to Clayton Kershaw in the playoffs. Los Angeles wanted no part of that.
I'm just happy that Mike Matheny's managing cost the Cardinals a playoff spot.
It's unbelievable it hadn't happened sooner.
I'm really happy they lost by 1 game, because all those times Twitter went off about Matt Carpenter and Brandon Moss sitting in games they lost. It came back to bite them.
I mean, that was the thing about it that made zero sense. It was like the last week or 2 of the season, and you're sitting your best players. Like, no manager in their right mind would be doing that. Like, that's what you do in the middle of August. You don't do it the final week or 2 of the season when you're fighting for a playoff spot.
I mean, Matt Carpenter was having an injury issue. I am convinced something had to have been really wrong for him to sit. But
I was also convinced that Britton was hurt, because it did cross common sense that he wouldn't pitch, and we thought that he was healthy. So.
Yeah, we should talk about this Zach Britton thing too, because I mean, Dan, did you get to watch that game last night, or was your dad live? Did you have you asleep?
Oh yeah, no, I was well asleep last night. Are you kidding me? No, I didn't see it, but obviously I've been caught up on everything. And when you consider the situation where Baltimore could have used a pitcher who has given up one earned run since April. April. And they used Ubaldo Jimenez instead. Like, automatic fire. Like, get him out of here. Like, there is zero excuse. It's not like this guy was just like the best relief pitcher they had in the team. No, he's the best relief pitcher in the league and maybe one of the best relief pitchers in a single season we've had in the last 10 years.
He might be a Cy Young Award winner.
Aldo in over him. Like, there was zero excuse for it. Buck Showalter had a old man moment or something, and I don't get it.
I think he had an old school moment, not necessarily an old man moment.
Old school?
I wanted to save my closer for a time when the game was tied, something like that, right, CJ?
Yeah, he was tied. You mean when they had the lead, right?
I mean, when he had the lead, yeah. Sorry.
Is that how Buck Showalter talks? I like
it.
That.
Is
that
now.
Was a great Buck Showalter.
Well, I gotta play my Ubaldo Jimenez.
You should have seen the reporter when he's like, so Britton wasn't available. He's like, no, he was healthy, ready to go. And the room was just like silent for 30 seconds. Just his
whole like, Ubaldo's been pitching really well. He's been our best pitcher.
Oh, stop.
Like he's your best pitcher. You have a guy who hasn't given up a run since April. I think he's your best pitcher.
Yeah, by the way, Ubaldo, who's been getting blown up in the first inning, he's been fine after that, but he's been getting blown up in the first inning, and so they throw him there. He's got walk issues, so they just put him in, in a relief role where, by the way, if you give up one run, the game's over.
The series is over. It's do or die. I mean, think of it, too. This isn't like a 7-game series where you can overcome it or save an arm for another day. It's literally, you lose, you go home. Like, if there was ever a scenario to play him,
and by the way, one last thing on Ubaldo's great stretch, his BABIP against was like 176 or something. I mean, just as unsustainable as unsustainable.
You computer nerds with your BABIP.
Oh, God. Did you see CJ Nikowski last night was losing his mind too over these guys, CJ?
Yeah, I saw that. I saw Dan Herron and Brandon McCarthy, I think it was, just kind of taking him to the woodshed.
Oh, yeah, Dan Herron, by the way. That's a great Twitter follow. Who are your favorite athlete Twitter follows, CJ?
Dan Herron is probably number 1. Brandon McCarthy, number 2.
Okay. What about where does J.R. Smith land?
I don't follow JR.
You don't follow JR?
No. Is that what I'm missing out?
Yes, it's JR. Anything could happen anytime. He's the modern day Ron Artest.
I don't think I follow a single athlete.
You don't follow Dan Herron? All right.
I mean, I followed his account before, but like, I don't think I'm an active follower of like any professional player. I think I'm up to look. I don't care about what they do in their off time. I don't care what they're promoting.
Okay, if it's an NBA, hold on.
Once, and then he was like, "Oh, I had some great chocolate milk today," and I was like, "I don't need that."
Yeah, but then you get the chocolate milk narrative. You're not excited about the chocolate milk narrative?
No, not excited.
There was a pitcher last night who had twins. There was I forget who it was. I have to go back and check. But one of the pitchers, he tweeted out the photo. His twins were born. It was the tight end. It was Kyle Rudolph. So you're not excited about the twin game, the twin narrative game.
Well,
see, I know you're on my side.
For you losers who are following all these professional athletes, do me a favor, just retweet these narrative tweets that go out there so I can see them, because I'm not going to waste an iota of my.
We're not here to do work for you,
Dan. Timeline. No, you are here to do work for me.
That's actually a good point. All right, CJ. Okay, so wait. Do you care about the Kyle Rudolph twins were born narrative game?
So when did this happen?
Last night.
Oh, you mean I get Kyle Rudolph against the Texans in a narrative streak game?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Let's just write that down really quickly so we don't forget it.
Twins. So it's 2 narratives.
Oh,
you get
the 2 narratives.
Double the narrative.
Oh, jeez.
The 3 Bs, man. Babies, birthdays, and bobbleheads. And we get 2 babies. How can you – I mean, Dan, come on. You've got to be better than this. How do
you know the baby narrative works for DFS too, Eric. So
why not?
Get working.
Yeah, let's just slow down there, buddy. I mean, you're looking at – do you remember when last year J.J. Barea had a baby toward the end of the season, and then he put up like 50 the next game?
It was beautiful. I remember that game.
It was beautiful.
J.J. Barea's wife is beautiful, by the way. She is a smoke show.
Okay, now what's the hierarchy, CJ, for you? What is most important? Babies, birthdays, bobbleheads for NBA?
Birthdays, for sure. I think birthdays is absolutely number 1. Baby's number 2, bobblehead's number 3.
See,
but
I'm opposite. Give me the bobblehead. Evan Gatta's bobblehead day. It's like
Steph
6
Curry's
in a row.
bobblehead game last night. Where was his bobblehead game last night? I didn't see it.
It's preseason. Come on.
It was a bobblehead game.
Wait, they were giving out bobbleheads in the preseason?
Yeah, Steph Curry bobblehead night.
Did you say Steph or Seth?
Steph Curry.
Yeah. You know your stadium sold out every single game when you're doing it in the preseason.
I mean, that's just unbelievable to me. First of all, I just want to say before we jump off here that they should not be having Steph Curry bobblehead night in the preseason. It should be Seth Curry bobblehead night in the preseason. Save this.
That's so rude to Seth Curry. Seth Curry did nothing to you other than be nice and put up fantasy points when you played him.
All right. Guys, that's got to do it for us on the DFS Throwdown. Thank you so much to CJ and Dan for joining me. We've had a lot of fun. We'll be back next month. For those two, I'm Eric. See you guys later.